Hey, how's it going? My name's Grace Woodward. I'm a professional development and outreach assistant with Maryland History Day. Maryland History Day is a program of Maryland Humanities, and I'm excited to chat with you all a little bit today about making the annotated bibliography. It's a super important part of any type of History Day project, so I'm excited to dive into it. All right, let's go. So, the Annotated Bibliography is a list of all the sources you consulted in developing your History Day project. Right? As you do your research, as you're trying to prove your thesis, you're going to come across all different kinds of things you want to use. Primary sources like photos and letters, and secondary sources like books and articles online. And what the Annotated Bibliography does is it keeps track of all of those pieces and shares them with your reader or whoever or your viewer for your project. So it kind of helps people understand the research you did. It walks them through your research process as well. And in that annotated bibliography, in that sharing of your History Day research, you've got two main pieces for each source. You have a citation and an annotation. And those two things together, one for every source, are what's going to build that entire annotated bibliography. So I'm going to go through that in a lot more detail in these next couple minutes, but that's kind of the big overview, the big picture of what we're going to be talking about today. So first things first, right? What do I mean when I say citations and annotations? Citations identify a source. They document it, they say where you found it, they give credit for who made it, and they can help others find it online or in archives if they want to find it for their own research or their own work. And then annotations give a little bit of context to that citation. They tell your reader how a source helped you in your project, how it contributed to your argument. They tell a little bit more about the source and explain why the source was useful. You can see on the right side of the screen, I've linked to a fun little video. I know you can't click on it right now because you're in the video, but if you go to National History Day's YouTube channel, they have really awesome tips about annotated bibliographies. I would definitely recommend watching those videos. A quick example of what I mean when I'm talking about a citation. So this is a citation I put together for an article from the SNCC Digital Gateway and the SNCC Legacy Project at Duke University. And it was an article online about Gloria Richardson, an important activist in Maryland. And so I put together the information for this article, which, hint, it's a secondary source. And then I also put together an annotation where I explain why the source could be useful, and I explain how it helped my project. Okay, so one of the things before we dig even further, we've talked a little bit about citations, we've talked about annotations, but the next big thing I want to think about is how we keep track of our sources. Keeping good track of your sources will help you keep track of what you found and help you later with your annotated bibliography. Sometimes it can be really tricky if you're not keeping track of your sources to go back and find what you were looking for, try to figure out what you were talking about. It just gets hard. You're like, I know I found this picture, but where did I find it? And then you have to waste all this time finding the stuff you've already found. So it can be especially easy to lose track of things. And so here are some ways that I know that I really like to keep track of my sources. My go-to is I make a bookmarks folder on my web browser, especially when I'm doing online research. I can just save those links. It's really quick, it's really easy. And then I also keep track of URLs and notes in a Word or a Google Doc. So for me, that's helpful if I find something at my local library. When I open up that book, I make sure to put it in my Word document I have where I'm keeping all of my URLs and notes. So later, I have that information I need when I'm ready to start building my citations. Another option is you can try note-taking apps like OneNote or Noodle Tools. Noodle Tools might be offered through your school. If you don't have Noodle Tools, if you're doing History Day for the first time, you are eligible for one free year. So definitely look into that. And you can always go with the more classic pen and paper option, keeping your own notes in a notebook, figuring out your own organization system, really whatever works best for you. Okay, that's my spiel about how important it is to keep track of sources. I've learned from experience, so it's always something I want to make sure to share. So once you've kept track of those sources, you've got them going together, we want to get into how we build the annotated bibliography. So that's how we take all those things that we've kept track of and we put them into this like finalized annotated bibliography. So for History Day projects, citations and bibliographic references follow the notes and bibliography style from Chicago Manual of Style. MLA is okay too, but NHD suggests students try using Chicago, like professional historians. Chicago is kind of the chosen style for historians in the field, but we totally understand that MLA is really common in schools, so students are more than welcome to use MLA as well. The examples I've been showing you today are all in Chicago, and I'll keep doing that just because it's what I'm familiar with and what I like to use best, but you definitely have both options. And the other thing that's important for building the annotated bibliography, and this is kind of in that formatting range, right? We're thinking about the annotated bibliography should be separated into two sections. One goes for primary sources and one for secondary sources. That's something that can get kind of tricky, but it's really great practice for teachers and students to think about the differences between primary sources and secondary sources as they're working on their History Day projects. And then the kind of questions about citations continue, right? What do we need to find for each citation? This is going to change a little bit for different citations, right? If we're citing photos or movies, or if we're citing videos or websites, it might look a little different. But generally, some of the important things we need to know are authors and creators of the source. This includes editors or translators, a title, including the title if it's part of a larger work, not just the web page title, but the website title as well. And publisher information, where it's published, who published it, who was in charge of publishing it, and really importantly, the date it was published or created. It's important to have that when. And also the where the sources can be accessed. So that might be a URL, that might be the library you found it in, or the digital collection you found it in. And as you can sort of see through this, right, we're getting that who, what, when, where. It's a big thing in History Day, and it's a big thing for citations too. Okay, so I'm going to give a little bit of example of that who, what, when, where with this kind of source. So the source I'm looking at right now is a narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. It's Frederick Douglass's autobiography, and this is an example of how I could look at the front page of that autobiography and find everything I need to know to write my citation. So I found the author in orange, that's Frederick Douglass. In that pinkish red color, I found the title of the work, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. And then I found where it was published, Boston, in that darker blue. And in the light blue, I found who published it, the Anti Slavery Office. That's already getting my brain buzzing before I've even gotten into the reading the autobiography itself. So, just a fun little thing to note. And then as well, I've got what time it was published at. So when it was published, that 1849 date. So you can see how I've combed through the front of this book to figure out all that information. But there's another place I can find it too. I can find all that same information lower on the web page where I found this item, right? So the Frederick Douglass book I'm showing you, I found it online. I found it at the Library of Congress. And the Library of Congress, below all its sources, has this really helpful about this item section. And so it tells me all this important information. And something I'm realizing looking at it now, right? And it's something we can all think about. Something that I missed when I just looked at the page is I didn't see that William Lloyd Garrison was involved. So it would be okay if I didn't have him in this source. It's not in the book, but once I see him here on this page under about this item, I realize maybe he's someone I should include. And that's always something to think about. And that kind of question is even something that could come up in my annotation. So let's try it with this source. This one's a kind of funky one. It's a Frederick Douglass mural in Washington, D.C. I found the photo in the Library of Congress, on the Library of Congress collections. And so what I'm really citing is not the mural, but the photo that was taken of the mural. So the person who took that photo was Carol Highsmith. And the title of the photo is Frederick Douglass Mural in Washington, D.C. I've got the published information, the date it was taken, and the website URL. That's that where you can find it. And I've put it all together to create this citation in Chicago style that you can see at the bottom of this slide. Okay, so I blew through those citations kind of quick. I might have made it seem like it's a little simple, and it is simple in some ways, but it's also challenging in others. So other things you can always look to when you're building citations are online citation helpers. So that's things like EasyBib or Noodle Tools. They'll help you make citations and help you enter this information, and then it will create the citation for you. And another thing that a lot of different collections online will have, the Library of Congress, for example, has this feature available, is they do some automatic citations. So if I went to this website URL, loc.gov, and I went to this specific item, and I was looking at this photo, The Library of Congress also creates a citation for me. So that's another little shortcut that we can offer to students. So we've talked about citations a little bit. We've gotten a better idea of what citations look like in an annotated bibliography. But right now let's focus on that annotated part. So when we need to include in our annotated bibliographies our support for our citations, and that's where the annotations come in. Annotations offer support and context for all the citations we're putting into our project. So the three questions I kind of like to start with when I'm making an annotation are shown on this slide. I like to think about what type of source is this? How was the source used? And how did the source help you understand the topic? And if I answer those three questions on my annotation, I've got it. I'm set, and I've given enough context for someone to use my annotated bibliography to help them better understand the History Day project I've worked on. Okay, so lock those three questions in and let's think about them moving forward. And I'm going to run us back to the Frederick Douglass autobiography that I showed you guys earlier. And I'm going to bring us back to that as we try to make our own annotation for that source. For our first draft, we can combine answers from the previous questions that I just showed you guys on the last slide. First things first, I've got my citation, the citation we worked on earlier, right? And then here's my first draft. Let's look at it. I say this source is an autobiography. I use this source because it told me about Frederick Douglass's life, how he learned to read and write, and how he became an abolitionist. This source helped me understand Douglass's feelings about slavery, reading, writing, freedom, and abolition. So I'm getting started there. It answers those three questions, but does it really explain what I learned from this source? Maybe I need some more details. So that's when I can get into draft number 2. So draft number 2, I'm getting a little bit more specific. But maybe you can already tell it gets a little wordy. I get a little long. So this draft number 2. This source is an autobiography. I use this source because it told me about Frederick Douglass's life, how he learned to read and write, and how he became an abolitionist. This source helped me understand Douglass's feelings about slavery, reading, writing, freedom, and abolition. I use this source to show how reading about patriotic values in the Columbian Orator helped to shape Douglass's ideas about slavery and abolition. So now I've got more details, but we're getting kind of long. And I also don't know if I've really told my reader how I use this source to support my argument. So let's look at my final draft. I've cleaned up my writing a little bit, I've gotten more concise, and I've written a little bit more clearly about the argument that I'm making in my project. Frederick Douglass's autobiography helped me understand the influence of reading and writing in Douglass's life and the importance of debates in his work as an abolitionist. It gave me details about how reading about patriotic values in the Columbian Orator shaped Douglass's ideas about slavery and abolition, which were apparent in his July 4th speech, "What to the slave is the 4th of July." Awesome. I'm liking that one a lot better. I think it's really come together. It's gotten more clear. I've answered those three questions, and I've done it in just 2 sentences, hitting all the parts of my annotation that I wanted to. On this slide, I've got a sample annotated bibliography. I'm only using 2 sources for this purpose. Normally, you'd obviously have a little bit more, but the important parts I've got covered. I've got my annotated bibliography separated into 2 sections. I've got primary sources and secondary sources. I've got my citations in that Chicago style, and I've got my annotations below. So you can kind of get a sense of how that annotated bibliography is going to come together. You can imagine filling this in with more sources, filling this in with even more information from my research. One of the things that I always like to point out for annotated bibliographies is how helpful it can be to look at samples. They're kind of formulaic, so seeing how people have done them for different projects is really helpful. So you can look at past History Day projects, you can look at ones from nationals or one from past Maryland History Day students, or you can even look at other annotated bibliographies online. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining me to learn more about annotated bibliographies today. I'm super excited for you to get working on your History Day projects, and good luck as you move forward and working on your History Day projects. I want to draw your attention real quick to some more resources we've got online that are super helpful when we're making an annotated bibliography for History Day projects. There's a ThinkPort learning module that you can find the link I've got up there. It's the first link you'll see. And we've also got some more information for History Day teachers in particular on our History Day Teacher Resources Padlet. And you can find even more on our website at mdhumanities.org. Awesome. Thanks so much. It was great to have you joining us for today. Thanks on behalf of the Maryland History Day team and all of Maryland Humanities. Good luck on your project.